because we have purposely exchanged pharmaceutical intensity, energy intensity, capital intensity for people. And I say that's a fair trade. And what that does is it moves our equity from depreciable physical stuff to skill, information, and relationships. And skill, information, and relationships are all wealth that a bank can't foreclose on and a lending agency can't put a lien on. So I suggest that that's a good trade, and I'm glad that our equity is in skill, knowledge, and relationships. That's better than a 401k plan any day.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to this special segment of It's Rainmaking Time. I am so excited because today we have a renowned lunatic farmer with us. The author of about to be over 16 books, one of the people that is stewarding the transformation, the renaissance, and the necessity of going back to the way nature did farming and agriculture. What's interesting about our guest is that he is one of the books that I read is called Folks, This Ain't Normal. And I have to tell you that it is so important that it should be required reading in every school for every child, young adult, and even adult in the country. It turns out that Joe Salatin is a regenerative farmer, but we can't really call him a regenerative farmer because he's really doing whole systems farming. He's doing regenerative farming, and he uses no chemicals on his land, with his animals, or the animals that are turned into food. It is the most humane, decent, remarkable system that he has created and developed over the last 40, 50 years. And it is my great pleasure and honor to have Joe Salatin here at It's Rainmaking Time. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Kim. It's really an honor and a privilege to be with you.
I have to tell you that I wanted to finish your book in time for this interview, and I only got to 135 pages in it. But I have to tell you that, you know, when you think just of composting, I never learned how to compost. In fact, in the 60s, I remember it was the hippies who were composting. And I thought, what are they doing? And there's flies coming out of that thing. And what is that? And that's so weird. And like, what are they doing with that? And that is because the education system that I grew up in Los Angeles didn't teach me and didn't teach most of us what composting is. And in your book, you talk about the fact that if more people would compost around the country and the world, there would be no starvation. There would be no famines. Explain that.
Yeah, well, the very notion that that chemicals can beat compost is completely anti-ecological. It doesn't accept the biology at all, and so. The thing to remember is that the way soil is developed, the way, the soil is a living thing. I mean, it's got over a billion beings. I like to call them beings. You can call them
they are
microorganisms, but it's they talk to each other, and they have this underground cafe. Hey, I'll trade you a little bit of boron for a little bit of that polysaccharide over there. And I always think about like that cafe in Star Wars, when Luke Skywalker goes, he's looking for a fast thing, and he first meets Han Solo, and you got that band over in the corner, and they got all these aliens, That's the way I see the underground in the soil.
That's a good example. I like that.
Yeah,
that's probably happening big time.
Yeah, it is. There's things, there's like. Things that look like a narwhal whale. There's stuff that, has scissors on their front end. They're chopping heads off of microbes and all this stuff going on. All right. And so, so the way soil and abundance is created on the planet is with decomposition. Things that were living decompose. Now they can decompose in a compost pile. They can decompose in an animal's intestines, but it's living material that was once alive and then it decomposes. And so if we, if we had had the great lie is that, wow, boy, I'm so glad, chemicals saved us, or, the Green Revolution, we'd all be dead. No, the truth is that if we had had a Manhattan Project for compost, not only would we have fed the world, we would have done it without three-legged salamanders, infertile frogs, and a dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico. That's the truth, and I mean I can go into it more, but that's the way abundance happens. And I think I just conclude with this on the point that it's important for all of us to understand that 500 years ago, North America produced more food than it does today. Now, it wasn't eaten by humans. It was eaten by 200 million bison. It was eaten by 200 million beavers and millions of passenger pigeons and birds, the likes of which we've never seen before. And so there was tremendous abundance here prior to John Deere hybridization, chemical fertilizers, and all the rest.
And the CO2 was much higher, interestingly enough.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank God for CO2.
yeah, and the actual animal weight on the planet was far more 1,000 years ago than it is today. So if animals are, if animals' burps and farts are causing, the incineration of the planet, when there were way more of that weight 1,000 years ago, why didn't it happen? And I would suggest that not only is that fallacious, but number two is that it's because, and that's what the folks This Ain't Normal book goes into. I talk about the choreography, the migratory choreography, and the movement of the animals, and the way it was done with the wolves, the predator, the prey, and so these are patterns. These are patterns that we see, and on our farm, we try to duplicate those patterns as closely as we possibly can, appreciating that the initial abundance and soil building of North America was developed under patterns that are ancient, that are of antiquity, long before modern times.
Would you explain to the audience who has not read your book or books, or who are not familiar with you, what you do with your cows and your animals by moving them around, and how explain how cows actually don't make the land not require mowing the same way, that they're actually mowers? Wish I
Yeah,
had a cow right here.
yeah, right. Well, so the reason that the planet needs so many mowers um, is that grass. So there's three kinds of basic vegetation. There's trees and bushes and forages or grasses. Grass, clover, legumes, dandelions. I'm including dandelions as grass. I mean, it's all the perennial forage material. And so if we want to convert the most amount of sunlight into biomass, i.e., carbon sequestration, uh, the most efficacious of those three types, trees, bushes, grasses, is grass. Now, it's a little counterintuitive because you look out at the woods, you say, "Well, look at all that carbon," but that's an accumulation over 80 years. If you took your lawn clippings and you put them in a bag for 80 years in a outbuilding off of maybe 1 square yard of lawn clippings. Every time you mow your lawn, you put the clippings from 1 square yard into the little outbuilding. In 80 years, it'd make a believer out of you. You realize, oh wow, there really is a lot of that material. And so grass is by far, and that's why the deepest soils on the planet all developed under prairies. They didn't develop under forests. They didn't develop under bushes. They developed
That's
under
interesting.
They developed under grasses, prairies, from the steppes of Mongolia to the pampas of Argentina to the savannas of Africa and to the plains of the of America. All right, but that those grasses have a problem. The problem is they grow really fast and they
Boy,
go
do
in.
they ever.
Yeah, yeah, right. And they go into senescence. If you don't mow them, they grow, they get a seed head, and then they turn brown, and then they fall over. They go into senescence. And so the reason the planet is full of so many herbivores, from giraffes to llamas to bison to wildebeest to cows and sheep and goats, the reason the planet is so full of these herbivores is to prune, to mow those grasses back, to restart, to keep them from going into senescence and turning brown, and to keep them vegetative. They need to be pruned just like an apple tree or a grapevine or anything. They need to be pruned to keep them in this rapid biological green state. Okay, and nature does that by moving the animals with predation, with flies, with monsoons and seasonality, hot, cold, rain, drought, all that moves them along. This grass, which is the most efficacious biomass accumulator, even better than trees, better than bushes, has a problem, and that is that it grows fast and goes into senescence and turns brown if you don't mow it or clip it in order to keep it vegetative and green and you know uh,
Taken care of.
photosynthetically functioning. All right, and so hence the herbivore. Enter the herbivore on this stage, and the herbivore then mows it, but the herbivore doesn't stay in one place. Predation, flies, monsoons, rain, dry, hot, cold, moves animals around. And so when you look at herbivores in nature, they're moving, they're mobbed up for predator protection, and they're mowing, moving, mobbing, mowing. Those three things. And and when those three things are in order, moving, mobbing, mowing, when that pattern's being done, the herbivore becomes an incredibly um, uh, ecologically beneficial element. But if you don't have even one of those three things, moving, mobbing, mowing, if you don't have even one of those three things, the herbivore becomes a liability, not an asset. And the problem is that in domestic livestock in the world, probably 95% of them are not being correctly moved, mobbed, and mowed, and as a result, we have a lot of overgrazing. We have a lot of issues and problems that, of course, a lot of people understand with the grazing animal. But it's not the animal problem. It's the manager of the animal that's the problem. And so on our farm, we use electric fencing and mobile infrastructure to move turkeys and cows and pigs and chickens and all this. We move them around literally daily to new paddocks, and that enables us to touch that forage, to touch that grass, more like you would a lawn, literally. And when it gets long, you mow it, and then it rests and it comes back. But if you mowed it right off to the ground level and you mowed it like that every day, your lawn would look very pretty. It comes along and prunes it off like a viticulturalist would prune a grapevine, or an orchardist would prune an apple tree, not to kill it, but to actually stimulate this new, verdant, freshened up growth. Everybody follow that? That's the role of the herbivore in nature. Well, how does nature do that? They do it with three M's. First of all, they're moving. They don't stay in the same place. You watch any nature documentary, and you're seeing the wildebeest migrate. They have a migratory choreography. They move from seasons and day to day. They move across. They don't stay in the same place. Number two is they're mobbed up. They're not all spread out off the Serengeti. They're mobbed up. Why are they mobbed up? Predator protection, yeah. So the predation keeps them mobbed up. That makes them eat way more aggressively faster, so they spend more time ruminating, chewing their cud. The whole science to that whole thing. And then the third thing is they're mowing. They're mowing. They're not eating dead chickens and dead cows and all, corn. They're eating forages and fermenting it. Okay? So moving, mobbing, mowing. Got it? Moving, mobbing, mowing. If you violate any one of those three, you take what nature gives us as a blessing or an asset and turn it into a liability.
I was very impressed when you shared the story about your cats and how when they had a chance to have was it the chickens who refused to eat the cow dung of neighbors or their neighbors' cow dung compared to yours. You got to explain that. That is a great story.
Well, so one year, this was early on. One year,
great story.
Yeah, we had a lot. We had a real warm, wet fall, and we went into winter with tons of grass, extra grass, and so I went to a neighbor and said, "Hey, would you like us to winter your cows for you on our grass? You don't have to feed them hay. You won't have to take care of them, and we'll just charge you, a per diem for cow, for keeping them." He said, "Yeah, sure." So it was a neighbor.
What a
here.
nice neighbor you are. I'm moving next door.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. So they just literally drove their herd of 80 cows. They had 80
Oh my.
cows, and they just drove them down let them walk, down the road. Didn't haul them in on trailers or anything. It was real close, and so we had these 80 cows, and at the time we had our egg mobiles. So we followed the cows with the chickens with portable, we call them egg mobiles, and the chickens.
I got to see this.
The chickens free range out, and they eat through the cow patties and eat out the fly larvae and parasites, pathogens, and things like that, and scatter the cow pies. So that as a pasture sanitizer, like the egret on the rhino's nose. This is one of the most basic symbiotic relationships in nature is birds following herbivores. So anyway, we had about 20 cows at the time of our own, and so I didn't want to mix them with the neighbor's cows. And so we had our cows over here running through this field, and then his cows came and they ran through this other field. Well, I was far more concerned about what he was going to bring to the farm than what our cows had. So I ran our eggmobiles over behind his cows. And the chickens wouldn't touch the cow patties. I mean, they wouldn't scratch through them. They wouldn't touch them. And what is this? This is crazy. I never saw. And so what has happened? So I brought them back over to our cows. Oh, they went right for the cow pies. They tore them all up. They ate the fly larvae and all this stuff.
That's wild.
And I took them back then to his cows. Same thing. They wouldn't. It was like the cow pies were like a demilitarized zone or something. And so what is this? And so I asked the neighbor, what he thought, and he said, "Oh, well, we didn't want to bring. I mean, you got to give him the benefit of the doubt." He said, "We didn't want to bring anything to your farm, so we made sure we gave them grubicides, parasiticides, and all this
Oh
stuff
my God.
before they came to your farm, so we wouldn't be putting anything on your farm." And so, Kim, those cow pies were completely sterile. They had nothing in them.
No nutrients in them. It was dead.
Nothing that the chickens wanted. And so so they were completely sterile. And that's why the chickens were averted to them.
Wow, I didn't even know chickens ate cow pies. It's really like,
well, they don't actually eat the manure. They eat the stuff that's in it. And the problem was there was nothing in it. So there was
I
no,
got you.
there was, I say there was no salary. There was no salary to pay the chickens to do their work, because there was nothing in them.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. You said also that around 1946, 50% of all produce was in our backyards,
Yeah, that's right.
backyard gardens.
Yeah, remember the Victory Gardens? I mean, I know
I'm
you're,
too young for that. No, I
yeah,
don't.
well, so am I, so am I. But I'm sure you've read about them or heard, old people talk
I've
about
heard
them.
of them, but I don't know about them.
Yeah, yeah. So 1946. This is post World War II, and during World War II, there was massive whatever uh, publicity or incentive, not financial incentive, but just cultural incentive. Americans, get your gardens in, grow your food. It was all part of the war effort. And so yeah, the food was grown in a lot of it in backyard gardens, and people had their own. If you had a postage stamp, you would put some squash and cucumbers and tomatoes in. You did that, and it was a totally different. It was a totally different participatory thing at that point to participate in food. This is before TV dinners and Hot Pockets and Lunchables and Skittles and Twizzlers.
Yeah, you had talked about, you said no civilization in history has ever been this connected from the environment, the ecology of land. You said it in a different way, but we're completely separated from the food, the
Yeah,
making of food, the growing of food, the localization of food. And you were pretty passionate about expressing how upset you were about the waste of food and plastic. And you used an example of the airlines, which I thought was very profound in terms of a food system.
yeah,
Would you talk a little bit about where you are now with that? So it's been, what, 14 years since this book was out. It was
yeah.
published in 2011, but everything still applies.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, we're no better now than we ever were. If uh, I do a lot more flying now than I did then because I'm speaking all over the world, and so I'm constantly on airplanes, and I'm still just uh,
Give
amazed.
an example. Give an example of what, like the process waste from the plastic on airlines. This is just an example. It's in many different industries. But go ahead and give an
Oh,
example of the whole system of it.
well, if you get a meal on an airplane, for example, um, every single morsel is wrapped in plastic. And you got to take the plastic off of the roll. You got to take the plastic off of the little fruit compote. You gotta take the everything. And what happens is, the little butter dip, is in this plastic container of butter dip. And I don't know if I'm just clumsy or what, but what I find is that this neat tray of meal, 5 minutes into it, what you have, it seems like you have a bushel basket of plastic, of the wrappers and the cellophane and all this stuff over here, and you're trying to keep it out of your lap, you're trying to keep it from your seatmate, you're trying to keep it contained, and now it's all bouncy and it just kind of grows, and oh my goodness, it just goes nuts, and so my as I've done transcontinental flights and things like that where you get a meal like that. I've often thought, my goodness, why couldn't they come along with a little paper bowl and a spoon to everybody, and just dip out some nice heavy beef stew, shoot, a couple spoonfuls of chicken pot pie or something. I mean, you could have a vegetarian one if you wanted, but the point is, why couldn't they just come along and give everybody a dollop of this, or a scoop of this? There'd be no trash, no nothing, no. I mean, these big planes, there's like a dump truck load of trash at the end of the flight, and And I mean, and that's just one plane. How many planes a day? Or, from um, Saudi Arabia to Singapore to Beijing and Tokyo. And so anyway, it's just an example of how of how we just can't think out of the box enough to say let's have a no waste simple type of system rather than all the trappings.
The I just wanted you to give an example, but I also I never knew when you described in your book that we really don't have local food systems like we used to, and that we really depend on, out of the area, out of state food that's not seasonal. So much of us. And what a huge difference that makes in terms of the huge billions of not only dollars, but probably pounds of
Yes.
wasted food. Talk about that. That's
Yeah.
really,
Yeah, it really is astounding. I was not long ago, I was having a conversation with a guy from Zimbabwe, and he was running a green bean processing facility in Zimbabwe that was exporting green beans to the European Union, EU, to Europe, and he said we process about 4 tons a day. 2 tons go into the market, and 2 tons are thrown away. We throw them away. I said, why do you throw the 2 tons? Why? Half of them are thrown away. These are green beans. This isn't. And and he said, well, because some are too fat, some are too thin, some are too long, some are too short, some are too crooked, some are, and and it struck me. So if you do your research right now, and this has not changed since the book was written, roughly, depending on what expert you read after, 40 to 50% of all human edible food on the planet is thrown away. That has never happened in civilization. Civilizations have always used if it's if it's edible for humans, you eat it. You don't throw it away. And so a lot of that throwaway is simply because of these huge centralized, concentrated, consolidated, long, multinational food distribution networks where sell-by dates expire, temperature, cold chains aren't held right, hot chains aren't held right. I mean, all sorts of things contribute to that. Historically, back when things were normal, there was a much closer link between the production of the food and the consumption of the food. And when you shorten that chain, you absolutely shorten the capacity for, for inventory oopses, for, all of the things that make something now, inedible. And this is something that's happened since the book. So I'll add this. I think this is the
sure.
kind of new development on that front as a result of all that waste. Think about the big push in the food companies now is how do we make it unspoilable? How do we make this food unspoilable? And so we have now ultra pasteurized milk. It's shelf stable. It can sit on the shelf for a year and still be fine. Um,
I didn't
lunch,
know that.
yeah, Lunchables, hot pockets, um, squeezable Velveeta cheese, and certainly breakfast cereals and all these things they don't they're
It's
shelf
not real
stable.
food.
No, they're not real food, and they're shelf stable. Well, anything that's that shelf stable um, will not decompose very well. If it won't decompose very well, it doesn't digest very well. And so the push has been to eliminate to package, to process and package foods so that it has a longer and longer and longer shelf life because of these long chains of custody between the farm and the plate. And that is very modern. Has there always been a food? Yes, there's always been a spice trade. Uh, but
That's different.
that's different. That's a very specialty, concentrated kind of thing. When Daniel Boone went to visit Kentucky, he wasn't carrying watermelons and squash on his horse. He was taking jerky and pemmican and very, very, very dehydrated, dense, nutrient dense stuff. And he was able to, shoot a deer or a pheasant or something along the way and augment his own food. Um, So yeah, when people talk about we're about to run out of food and everything, no, listen, actually the planet could increase its population by half right now today without growing another piece of food if we simply stopped the spoilage and the waste and the inefficiency of our international concentrated food system.
Most of us don't know how to can food, dehydrate food, even how to ferment food. I'm just learning how to ferment now,
Yeah,
actually.
that's
And
wonderful.
Dr. William Davis showing people how to get L. reuteri into um, highly fermented kind of a yogurt to replenish the bacteria that's been missing in the gut for years. And it seems like the same industry is at work and is afoot in agriculture that is in pharmaceutical industry as well. In other words, that's also in oil and gas industry. It's big industry and it's centralized big industry. Talk a little bit about why you have said that people think of you either or call you a lunatic farmer or a bioterrorist. I heard you in an interview say that you were called a bioterrorist. How could anybody call you a bioterrorist just because you're not using chemicals? What does that mean?
Well, yeah, I'm called that because I don't vaccinate my animals, and so that means that when a mallard, a wild mallard duck flies over and poops, then that poop is going to contain some sort of a virus that's going to make my cows sick, and my sick cows are going to rub noses with the neighbor's cows, and his cows are going to get sick, and so we're going to start an epizootic of cow contagion because I'm so derelict that I don't vaccinate my cows. And so this is the mentality in the system, and and so over the years I wrestled with, well, do I get frustrated and angry and get stomach ulcers because I'm all torn up about this antipathy, if you will, from the conventional agriculture sector. And I remember after one especially vituperative phone call, a guy had just called me a bioterrorist. I hung up and I told Teresa, I said, well, I can either be upset about this or I can just embrace it, have fun with it. And so I decided on the latter. I decided to have fun with it, embrace it, and say, sure, okay, I'm a lunatic. Yep, yeah, okay, world, I'm a lunatic. And that has really stuck, and I can do it with a smile. It turns it from, anger into levity,
Yeah.
and that's a nice thing. And it becomes actually a little bit discomfiting for the opposition that I don't take the bait and fight back with the same attitude, the same whatever, disdain.
Paradigm.
Yeah, the
The
same
paradigm.
disdain. Yeah, that they have against me, and it's become and look, Kim, what's really cool is
Mm.
it's really cool to come up with a handle that is unique on the entire planet. So there's not lunatic farmer on the planet. I mean, that's pretty cool to come up with
That
something
is
so
cool.
unique that
That is cool, but you seem to have weathered the bioterrorism association very well, brought in the levity and transmuted it. At the same time, I mean, uh, when you think about the USDA and you think about who's in power now in the United States and who's running things agriculturally, I don't think they know what you know. And I don't think even the people that have been elected or selected that are part of the existing cabinet understand the whole thing about vaccinating and the animals and the whole bit. So, how would you explain to Brooke Rollins? Would you have her come to your farm? Would she
oh
come to your farm? You're in Virginia.
yeah, I would love for her to come to our farm. I have a anyone that knows us knows that we have a 24/7 365 open door policy for anyone
Isn't
to come from anywhere in the world anytime to see anything anywhere unannounced. That's our commitment to transparency. We don't have, fences and no trespassing zones. Look, you don't have to put on a hazmat suit and walk through sheep dip to come and visit our farm. I suggest that if you have to put on a hazmat suit and walk through sheep dip to go visit your food, you might not want to eat it. And so this is the shift. So in its most fundamental form, I think that the paradigm you said the word paradigm,
yes,
the paradigm difference between the USDA and me right now, or we could even say the cultural and me, and I'm not alone. There are many of us that adhere to this. The main difference is that the powers that be in our Western reductionist culture view life as fundamentally mechanical. They view it
right,
like a car. They view it like an appliance. Okay. I view life as fundamentally biological. And there's a big difference between mechanics and biology. One of the biggest differences, I think there are, I mean, we could list many, but the two main ones I think that I'd like to list. One is that biological things are responsively dynamic.
yep,
You can go out and tell your car, your new car all day. You can sprawl across the hood, give it a big hug and say, I love you. That car doesn't care one lick, that you love it, but you can take a tomato plant, a chicken, a cow, and you can do that. And
it's
and yeah,
responsive.
yeah, plants even we know
Yeah,
that they respond to this love, and so there is a dynamic responsiveness to things that are biological as opposed to mechanical. The other thing is that biological biology can heal if it's abused. If it's abused once, it can heal. I mean, we see that you get a what you hurt you get a scab on your hand, and your body uh, covers it up, and then it puts a scab on it, and then finally, over a period of time, the scab comes off, and you have new skin. Mechanical things don't do that. If a bearing goes out in your front wheel bearing of your car, you don't wait a month and it heals. It doesn't matter how much you wait on it. It doesn't matter how much you ask it to forgive you for not giving it the proper lubrication or whatever. That bearing is going to go thump, thump, thump when you start and running a car. But living things can heal. They can forgive. They can compensate for abuse, and goodness, I mean, there's all sorts of ramifications here. I mean, even to our marriages. Our marriages are not mechanical. I mean, aren't we thankful that I can say a misfit word to my spouse and then apologize, and we can go. That's life. But if you abuse your chainsaw and it cuts your leg off, that chainsaw doesn't care a lick that it just cuts your leg off, as opposed to going through a piece of wood. And so, this responsiveness and this ability to remediate, to heal, are two huge, huge differences between biological systems and mechanical systems. And the problem we have right now in our culture is that the people in charge generally view life as fundamentally mechanical. That's why everything is about genetics, DNA, stripping this out, stripping that out. I mean, they're trying to find the porcine, that's a pig, porcine stress gene, so we can grow pigs without a stress gene, so we can abuse them more, but they won't care about it. And I mean that's the level that's where this kind of thinking takes you. So yeah, I would absolutely welcome Brooke here anytime. I'm glad to sit down and have a chat with her. But
I think she'd be amazed. I think
yeah,
she would be amazed if what I read, and folks,
yeah,
this ain't normal so far,
yeah,
about Polyface Farms, what you're doing there, she should come see it as a model because this can be transmitted to other farmers and to other land. At the same time, we have all this land being purchased by Bill Gates, so trying to
yeah,
buy off as much agricultural land as
right,
possible.
right,
We have the hybridization of seeds and the genetic modification of seeds,
yep,
changing the nature of even the heirloom seeds and plants that
yeah,
are growing.
yeah,
So with all this going on, one of the things I also noticed is you talked about how grain production has devastated the world economy. Can you explain that? Because we didn't find out really until Wheat Belly came out by Dr. Davis, et cetera. There were some of the real problems with what happened to grains in the last, whatever,
yeah,
50 or 80 years.
yeah.
Explain it.
So
Explain the economy part, how grain
yeah,
has devastated.
sure, sure. So the economy part is that prior to very, very modern times, petroleum and machines, big machines, grain was always very, very expensive. And that's why it was one of the holy grails of agriculture, was because it was extremely expensive. Because to grow grain, you have to stir the soil. You have to get rid of the prairie. You have to get rid of the sod, and break ground. And that is very, very difficult to do if you're walking behind an ox with a sharp stick. That's really hard to do. And so historically, grain was always it was always a minor part of agriculture. The diets of antiquity were based on herbivores and seafood, because those were the two things, the two nutrient dense, and herbivores include dairy, because herbivores and seafood were the two nutrient dense foods that could be grown without tillage, because tillage was so laborious. It was difficult, and the ratio, if you read Thomas Jefferson's farm book and look at the prices of his day, he recorded all this stuff, and I mean, if he'd recorded that stuff right now, a loaf of bread would be, $20, and
Wow.
grain would be completely different. The peasant food was goat, lamb, and beef, and milk at dairy. That was the
Wow.
peasant food. The expensive food was chicken, was poultry, because it was an omnivore, and so it was very special. So grain was historically very, very expensive, and it's only become cheap since the Industrial Revolution, since the discovery of petroleum for cheap energy, and the mechanics to be able to to be able to denude the ground of its sod, of its perennial prairie cover. That is where grain has become very, to the point now where, imagine this, something like 40% of all the corn grown in the U.S. is not used for people. It's not even used for animals. It goes into alcohol. I mean, we're here we
It's
are.
insane.
It
It's
is it
insane.
is insane. And so on such a large scale as this, and look at the amount of wheat that the average person is eating today. If you look at how much wheat we ate even 50 years ago compared to today. Today it's like, 6 times as much wheat, with all the crackers and Doritos and Frito-Lay and everything else. snack foods and breakfast cereals and things instead of, a breakfast of bacon and eggs and sausage and eggs and things like that that historically everybody ate. And so we are now not only growing, but we are ingesting so much more grain than we ever did, historically, that all of that tillage,
What do you just define that for the audience? What is tillage? What you call
tillage.
tillage?
All right. Well, when you till, all right, let's say your lawn. Let's say you want to put a garden in your lawn. You want to grow some tomatoes and some pepper plants and
Right,
squash in your lawn.
right.
You can't just put those seeds in the grass. It's not going to grow. So you have to
Dig
disturb.
dirt.
You have to dig dirt. You have to till. You have to do something in order to break that grass in order to grow something. Well, that's exactly what you have to do if you're going to grow corn or soybeans or wheat or any other annual. You have to break that sod in order to, to grow an annual. And nature, Kim, nature doesn't grow very many annuals. Most of nature's stuff is a perennial. Perennials
Well,
are
explain that. What does that
yeah.
mean?
Well, perennials you don't have to plant all the time, like your lawn, like a tree, like a bush or a shrub. Okay, those are perennials, uh, and and nature doesn't actually have very many annuals. It's mainly perennials. Why? Because there was nobody to plant them. They have to survive in situ on their own. They have to be able to take droughts and floods and blizzards and heat and all this, in situ. And so a perennial has a different energy flow than an annual. A perennial has an energy flow that sucks sunlight and pulls it down into the root structure so the plant can handle, stresses, whereas an annual tends to be extractive of soil and put it out here in a big seed or a fruit or something, and depend on something else, whether it's a human or hitching a ride on a waddling possum somewhere, or a spider web, and it depends on something else to get it onto ground that it can sprout and grow and plant by itself. So nature doesn't till. Nature doesn't disturb the soil that much, and so there aren't. Well, it doesn't disturb it like a plow, but for sure, and as a result, um, the fact that we have gone to a
Industrial level of plowing
yeah,
and
yeah,
tilling,
yeah,
right? That's
well
what's
said,
happened.
well said, and not only that, but the six plants that American agriculture policy subsidizes. There are six things that that the USDA subsidizes for farmers, and all six of them are annuals. They're not perennials.
Oh my
Corn,
God.
soybeans, wheat, rice, cotton, and sugarcane. Like we really need to be subsidizing sugarcane, and so those six crops are all annuals. They're all soil debilitating, and that's what we incentivize.
Do you think that we can ever get the soil back? Is the soil healable? I don't know if that's a word, healable. Is it capable of healing after all of the disruption and
Yes,
disturbance?
that's the beauty of this. Every day, millions and millions of whatever photon sun, solar energy is touching the ground and it's wanting to grow green material. And green material, when it decomposes, it builds soil, organic matter. And so on our farm, we came in, 1961. We had large areas, I mean, quarter acre of solid rock. Okay, just the 150 years of colonial and and 20th century tillage, plowing had eroded the soils here to 3 to 5 feet of soils had washed off of these hills here in our area. And so when we came, there were these big, like galls. They're like sores, on the landscape, just solid rock down to the shale. Nothing would grow, no plants, no nothing. I remember seeing those as a child. And today they have, 14 to 16 inches of soil on them. We never hauled soil in. We didn't haul. It was like a scab. And every year, about 18 inches of the edge, you'd see it. 18 inches would come in, 18 inches would come in, just like a scab healing until today. Those are all soiled up. Now, they're not 3 to 5 feet deep yet. It's going to be a few more years till that happens. But absolutely, you can absolutely grow soil, which is one of the most, hopeful things that anybody can imagine. That all of this, that's the thing about living things, right? You can abuse it, and then the same head and hands that have abused it and raped it, if you will, can also nurture it and caress it back into a redemptive state. And that is an ultimately hopeful thing.
What is stewardship?
Stewardship, I think, is appreciating that ultimately we don't own it. So, in my faith position, I think God owns it all. And so I'm just here kind of as a caretaker. And yeah, I know the courthouse says we own it, but we don't actually own it. As we say, we inherit it from our ancestors, and we borrow it from our children. And so stewardship is, I think, a return on investment, if you will, ROI. Imagine it this way, so that the owner gets more soil, more wildlife, more water, more breathable air, more abundance from us having walked our pilgrimage, and
That's
that's,
beautiful.
that's the ultimate honor and privilege that I people say, what keeps you going? Well, it's being able to step out that back porch every morning and viscerally participate in God's in
Creation.
God's property, and touch it that way. That's a powerful thing.
How do you get through the cycle where you raise all these animals, you love them, you look after them, they look after you and the farm, and then you have to say goodbye? Are you at a point in having done this for so long and your family's done this so long, that do you have a connection when you have to put an animal to sleep and send them off to become food? Because this is the only part. Years ago I did a show on world farming, and I interviewed a guy in the United Kingdom, and the one thing I said to him was, animals never need to suffer to become food, ever.
Right,
And they don't need to be abused and suffer to become food. There's a way, there's a humane way
right,
to have them become food. And it seems like in your entire process, everything that you describe is life-giving, even the process by which they have to become food on your farm. Do you have anything you'd
right.
like to say about that?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. Well, I would. Oh, first of all, let me say, that an animal is not a human. Uh,
right.
and
Thank you.
and I think in the book actually have a chapter titled something
You
like,
do.
my dog is my cat, is my aunt, is my nephew,
I
is my
saw that.
pig. And 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 part of that has come because, Kim, because our culture is so divorced from visceral participation in food.
Yes.
Our ancestors didn't sit around and have focus group discussions on, is slaughtering a cow for hamburgers, is that murder? Uh, our ancestors, if they could catch it, capture it, trap it, shoot it, they ate it and they got whoa, great, they got to live another day. All right, they didn't they didn't occupy their time sitting around, sipping Starbucks lattes, talking about the philosophical or the philosophical ramifications of eating an animal. So part of this is
Yeah.
simply an evolution within our culture of disconnection to our ecological umbilical. That's number one. Number two, though, is yes, we to go to great lengths of making sure that all the animals have a a life experience that allows their most basic um, physiological and phenotypical desires to flourish. So we do ask how to make happy pigs, happy chickens, and happy cows, and so these animals are completely unstressed. And and then
I
when
hear
we
that makes better meat too, actually. Much
absolutely
better.
does, yeah, absolutely does, because it's not secreting adrenaline all day, which is what you secrete, when you're under stress. And this when they come to, well, like especially the chickens, where we don't electrocute, we don't suffocate. We do basically a halal kosher type slaughter where we just slit the throat, and it's about like a paper cut, and the brain goes dead within half a second. Because when you lose that blood flow to the brain, it's gone. And so, there's no suffering, there's no, we don't want to hear a bunch of squawking and a bunch of carrying
Crying and
on. We,
screaming and
we,
yeah.
we even we even put them in cones. So the Temple Grandin idea of the hug, we
Yeah.
put them in the cones
Yeah.
so that they're hugged and they don't carry on. There's a lot that you can do
That's
here.
really cool. I met her. I ran into her in an elevator in Pasadena, California about
Oh my
5 years
goodness.
ago.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I was like, "Oh my God, you look so familiar."
yeah. Well, I've done
Well,
I've
she's
done numerous
wonderful.
I've done numerous conference presentations with Temple. She's been here to our farm, and my what a grand lady she is. She's
Yes, indeed.
really cool. She's really cool.
Well, I think that's great that you do that. I mean, it's often I think because of the huge magnitude of industrial farming. There's no care to, they're slammed together, they're overcrowded, they don't see
Yeah,
sunlight. A lot of the animals, they're treated terribly, and
yeah.
so you would think that people would be flocking to your place from all over the country. Is that true or not true?
Um, well, it's not true. I mean,
You have the model. You have the model,
yeah, yeah, but
right?
you have to realize that, oh my, routine, habit, all these things are, where do you get your food? You get it at Walmart, at Costco. You don't get it
Not me.
alternative. You don't get, well, yeah, but the average person, and frankly, Kim, I think the average person just doesn't even think about these things.
That's true.
As long as the NFL is on TV and the roof isn't leaking and there's beer in the fridge, life is good. Literally. I mean, we literally have a non a almost a disintentional mindset in our culture. I got to write that down. That's a pretty good idea.
I don't mind if you do. I will tell you, when I first got to Virginia and I went to the markets, I was horrified. And by the way, in most places that I've
Mhm.
been and lived.
Yes, right.
And so I went to Gore's, and
Okay.
that is considered, locally to have the better meat if you can find
Mhm.
it, right?
Right, right.
And I asked them a question. I said, "What kind of injections are these animals getting?" And they said, "I don't know. You'll have to call there." I think that as a consumer, we should know. Do you know what
Yeah,
I'm saying? We should
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. Well, and you should care. I mean, that's the thing that gets me is you should care.
I mean,
And
we're eating it, right?
yeah, yeah. And so the fact that this year in 2025, McDonald's has already announced that they're going to expand by 2,200 restaurants, um, shows that we're not anywhere close to to changing that trajectory. For me, I'll just show my bias. For
Sure.
me, McDonald's is like
Monsanto.
they're like the barometer. Yeah, like they're the most um, um, industrial, anti-ecological, everything. And so when people say, "Are we making progress?" I will say we're making progress the year I see McDonald's not being able to build a new restaurant because people are opting out of that. And
I
I'm
even hear that the meat, the supposed meat that they serve, isn't even totally real meat.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst
Yes.
of the worst that you can
Yeah,
find.
yeah. It's the cheapest, worst scrapings you can find. And so yeah, I'm
Going
ready.
to children, mostly children.
Yeah, I'm ready to have that. Well, same thing as with the school lunch program. That's an entire, and of course, the prison system.
Oh my God.
I was talking to a guy who's in the management of a very, very large prison in Alabama, and I said, well, what's the budget for the meal in the prison system? What's the budget? And and it was like 90 cents a meal. Well, what can you possibly buy for 90 cents a meal? And so he said they had agreements with people like Walmart and Costco and these great big outfits that when they that instead of they were the prison was basically a landfill, an option to the landfill. So when stuff
Oh my God.
sell by expired and or it was not acceptable, blemished or something, why that's what they would pick up. And they had all these kind of backdoor agreements with the
Whoa.
industry to be able to use their salvage. And so yeah, there's a lot going on.
How does the USDA perceive your contribution to farming and agriculture at this point in 2025? Would you say?
uh, I think in general they view me as an example of inefficiency. Uh,
Really?
oh yeah, yeah.
Oh my God.
And vulnerability. I mean, this bird flu thing. Look at
Talk
how
about that. Wasn't it 1.6 million birds were just killed this year?
well, I don't know how many.
I think it was 1.1 million six
It,
hundred
it's
thousand.
it's 100 and it's 166. It's
I'm
160
sorry, 1.6 million.
billion. It's 166 million chickens have been killed in the last 24 months, and I think we've just done another like
Oh my God.
10 million just in March. Um,
Can you
and
explain the insanity of that? Because people don't get it. They hear on the news, oh, bird flu, it's the end. You got to get rid of everything. And of course, then they show pictures of people getting rid of all these birds in China. And if one bird is sick, you got to kill them all. Explain how that doesn't apply. We're applying the mechanistic view again. Explain
yeah,
that,
well,
though.
well, just imagine if in COVID, if somebody in your household got COVID, they came in and killed everybody in your household. Or if you had been near somebody that had COVID, they killed you. That's what we're doing with this bird flu. Only of these 166 million that have been killed, only about 1 or 2 million have been sick. The rest of them have been healthy. And and so and now we don't know if they got it and got over it, or we don't know if they didn't get it or whatever. But the point is that one of the most fundamental rules of whatever genetic adaptation and selection is if you have a sickness, you don't kill the survivors. If there's one thing you don't kill, it's the survivors. And so this bird flu policy of killing the survivors is not only unscientific, it's insanity. the survivors you keep and and you breed those and you develop adaptation to the virus with the living thing. That's that. And secondly, there are, just like there was at COVID, there were numerous alternatives that were very efficacious, that were, hydrochloroquine, ivermectin. These things were very effective and shown very effective very early on, but were completely poo-pooed by the establishment, by Fauci and company. And we've
Oh,
got the
wow.
same thing now with bird flu. There's a product called hypochlorous. It's an antiviral, antimicrobial. You can drink it, and it's been shown almost 100% effective against bird flu. There's a CDS material. There's a one that starts with a Q, quinolin or something like that. And then there are some homeopathic remedies. There are numerous people that are using alternative things you know, to either mass killing or mRNA injection, and they're being shown very effective. But Kim, the USDA, they won't even run a trial on these alternative ideas.
That's
The
crazy.
the pharmaceutical companies, I'm telling you, the pharmaceutical companies, it, it's almost incalculable. It's unfathomable the level of power that these pharmaceutical companies have.
They're
I think,
like the FDA shutting
yeah,
down doctors.
right,
I mean, one guy, Dr. Brownstein, who's known for his work in the thyroid and
right.
iodine and everything, was using a treatment process and his treatment protocol using iodine and in what was it, inhaling? I can't remember what it was. This material, and people were getting well, like
Yeah, yeah,
quickly, few
right,
days, done.
right.
And the FDA wrote him a letter and said, "You're going to take everything off your website. If you practice anymore, we're shutting you down." The whole bit, and people were getting well, but because he wasn't using what the FDA was saying, you had Fauci was saying you have to, and so
Yes.
his whole practice was threatened. He had to, I mean, and he was, and people were getting well, and it's the
Yeah,
same mentality, the
same.
same industrial complex that's doing
Yeah,
this.
yeah, exactly. It's an um, unbelievable tyranny or arrogance. I mean, it's like Dr. Brownstein is like a heretic, and
Yeah.
he's treated just like a heretic, like Galileo and Copernicus were when they first suggested that
And
maybe.
nobody died under his care. People got well, et
Yeah,
cetera. I mean, it
yeah,
was, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
hydrogen peroxide. It was a certain amount of
Yeah,
hydrogen
yeah,
peroxide,
sure.
saline, and a little bit of iodine drops done. And I mean, literally could have lost his license.
This is the thing. In times when Peter Bain wrote Urban Permaculture, he had a statement in that book that's just so profound. He says, "In times of epochal change," and I think anybody alive today that's got their ear to the ground understands that we might be in a time of epochal change. In times of epochal change, the most important thing to preserve is the ability to practice and think alternatively, because
Wow, that's profound. That's true
it is
and
profound.
profound.
Because it is in that alternative thought process, alternative practice process, that true solutions develop. You're never going to get it from the powers that be. They all circle the wagons and let's preserve the status quo. So things like you know uh, completely alternative therapies very much threaten
Right.
the powers that be. Alternative energy sources, true alternative energy sources, alternative to both solar panels and petroleum, threaten the status quo. And that's why I'm such a huge believer in no censorship, no deplatforming, no. In fact, I think if somebody wants to the internet, if it truly is a utility, these big social media companies, there should be no censorship whatsoever.
I've
Uh,
been through it a lot, by the way. I did
yeah,
a 2 hour special called Calling in the Constitution with a great mastermind who has over 50 years of experience, Dr. Edwin Vieira, who, by the way, lives right here in Virginia.
They've created this dichotomy. There's you, the civilian over here, and then there's this governmental establishment. And if you say anything against the governmental establishment, you are some kind of seditious individual, or insurrectionary, or whatever it is, anti-government person. When they don't seem to realize that the real government of this country is not them, it's you. And they have besotted you with propaganda to prevent you from understanding this.
mhm.
And I literally watched the then platform Twitter on a 1 minute spot shadow ban me. I mean, I watched this over and over on Facebook, on YouTube, etc. I was so mad. It was a
Mhm.
2 hour special. It was 4 hours of shooting, months of editing, and I couldn't get it through to be watched. Calling in the Constitution with Dr. Edwin Vieira.
Yeah,
It's a
that's wonderful.
blockbuster.
Yeah, yeah. So, on Dr. Sina McCullough and I's podcast we do once a week, we've been censored, deplatformed, everything. We finally went behind a paywall, and so we just put little snippets on YouTube, that we think they
Yeah.
deplatform. I mean, this Kim, you gotta have free speech. I mean, you've got to be able to bring ideas to the fore, or if you're sequestering ideas and practices, then you'll never be
It's
able to
big
get.
industry. Censorship is actually an industry. I found
Yeah,
out in the last 2 years, an industry
yeah,
with agencies like the Pentagon and other agencies, intelligence agencies involved in this effort.
yes, yes,
And I lived in 3 countries in Europe, and so I've seen even the agriculture over there and what's done and what's valued, et cetera.
right, right.
I have another question to ask you about. You say in page 67, you talk about it's 1,500 miles from the field to the fork and how much energy it takes to bring food to us. What would be the transformational step that we can take and should take individually and collectively to get more local food available? What are we going to do?
Well, you just simply have to start patronizing it. I mean, um, so
I mean, I
this
go to farmers markets. I
yeah,
do go to
yeah,
farmers
yeah, good,
markets. Yeah.
good. So we live in a time, as you know, where it's now chic to say I defunding. Defunding has become it's time to defund Tyson, defund Walmart, defund Costco, and so if if everybody would simply defund the industrial and move those funds over to
The local
regional,
farms.
yeah, regional food systems, or just alternative farms. I mean, we ship, and I'm trying to do a shameless plug here, but we ship nationwide now. We started that in 2019. Logistics and distribution have become incredibly cheap compared to what they were even 20 years ago. The cost of bricks and mortar retail interface has escalated, and the cost of distribution has diminished. And so those two things have come kind of into equilibrium. Right now, just to give you an example, right now, we can, from our farm here in Swope, Virginia, we can ship UPS, we can ship 4 dozen eggs to Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, cheaper than they can get them at farmers markets. And that's
Oh my
because
God.
the cost of living in places where they defund the police, they have smash and grab, high crime, high taxation, high
Yeah.
regulation, in these urban areas. The cost of doing business there is so high that here we are in a place where you never have to lock your car. You have low taxes. We just live in this backwater, um, using using the power of distribution logistics. Now we can actually ship eggs. If you'd have told me we are going to do this 10 years ago, I'd have told you were nuts. All right. But if I'd have told you 40 years ago that you're going to get into an unmarked car with a person that hasn't been to special driving school, car isn't inspected, doesn't have taxi on the top, and you're going to say, take me to the Eiffel Tower, anywhere in the world, you'd have said, what?
I've
Are
been
you
there.
yeah, yeah. They say, "Well, are you crazy?" Okay, and so what's happened is that the internet has democratized real time accountability, like which is taking us back to a global voice that is similar to the village voice when the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker were embedded in the community. That had its own vetting and auditing, because people knew who the butcher, baker, candlestick maker were. The good ones commanded a better price. The poor ones didn't or went out of business. And there was a village accountability. Well, today, so we had a hiccup. We had a hiccup technologically and culturally between those days, the Industrial Revolution, and then till the internet came along to bring back this real-time village voice. The reason Uber works is because if you're a pain of a rider, nobody picks you up, and if you're a pain of a driver, nobody wants to ride in your car. And you have
Yeah,
this transparent real-time thing. And so what's happened in the food system, Kim, is that we have industrialized the food system. We industrialized
totally.
it prior to the internet. And so consumers wanted a bigger bully than the industrial food system. And so they asked the government to be the bigger bully. Well, that's now obsolete. We don't need that kind of oversight any more than we need, a special, chauffeur's license to be able to, take somebody from the airport to a hotel. Be, be, because of the democratization of information and real-time feedback loops through the internet. And so here we are, in the food system. We've got all sorts of cool platforms now developing. I mean, I'm in touch with many of them that are developing to get to create farm to fork, direct sales. Numerous platforms now, and those are just coming on, as fast as Uber did. And so I
That's
think
fantastic.
I
Have you
think
met Kimball Musk?
I haven't. No.
Have you hear he's involved in growing
Yeah.
like advancing food systems? I don't know exactly what he's doing. I just heard
Yeah.
it's either a business or a hobby of his. Maybe somebody
Yeah.
that might be
Well,
interested in
he,
what you're
he
doing.
yeah, he's got some in with some powerful people. Yeah.
Um, should we talk just a moment or two about the food police? I think that people don't realize what farmers go through. If you could shed a little light to the public who hasn't gotten to your books yet.
Yeah. Um, so we were just kind of on that as I was talking about. What happens is when people can't see the behind the curtain of what they're buying,
Right.
they look for that. Well, they become fearful. And what happens when you become fearful is that you want something that'll give you security, that'll give you a stamp of credential that this is okay. And so in the opaque industrial system, they look to the government to be the bigger bully, if you will. We need one bully just a little bigger than Tyson, okay? And so people look to the government to do that. During that time, regulations have become incredibly prejudicial against newcomers to the market or alternatives to the market. And so all food regulations now, I call it the food police, yeah, all food regulations are scale prejudicial. So they're easier to comply with and get a license if you're big than if you're small. And
That's
this,
so sad. Oh
yeah,
my God.
yeah, and this artificially precludes um, and inhibits the ability of a small producer to to access the marketplace. And um, so my my kind of my big political pitch right now, and I'm in touch with some RFK Jr. and some kind of powerful people now. And I'm a one string banjo, and I propose the Food Emancipation Proclamation.
I
Uh,
love it.
and what this would do would be to allow, if you want to come to my farm as a voluntary consenting adult, I'm using
Yes, of
powerful
course.
language here, and ask around, look around, smell around, and you want to engage with me in a food transaction, whether it's a pot pie or a pound of sausage or some homemade, bologna that I've made, we should be able to engage in a food transaction without a bureaucrat in the middle of
In the
that
middle.
transaction,
Right.
as neighbor to neighbor. We tout ourselves as a culture now of choice. We've got choice in the bathroom, choice in the bedroom, choice in the, choice
Everything except food.
everything except
Food and
except
medicine now.
yeah, yeah, except the kitchen. We don't have choice in the kitchen, and and people say, well, I go into Walmart. Look at all the choice there. Yeah, but all of that choice is industrial. It comes through an industrial sieve. If you ever look at like whenever there's a food recall, amazing. You look at this food recall from such and such a plant in Kansas, and here are the brands, and then you have these like 20 brands. Why? Because they're all coming out of the same spout. All right. And we desperately need a way for neighbor to neighbor food commerce to occur at that level of freedom of choice as voluntary consenting adults engaging in a transaction without a government official, without having to get a license and a bunch of compliance and costly things. And so all of this is scale prejudicial and denies competition in the marketplace. People are always complaining about, well, four companies control 85% of America's meat supply. Well, how did we get there? How we got there was these regulations that made it
Yeah.
difficult for somebody like us to compete. And and if we do jump through all the hurdles that are scale prejudicial, it creates an artificial price premium on our product because we can't spread the licensing and the infrastructure compliance over as many pounds or widgets as a Tyson. And
Right.
the result
The
is
distribution isn't there. The same
yeah,
distribution isn't
right,
there.
right, for the overheads. And so it costs us $400 for per beef animal, for example, to do what JBS or Iowa Beef Packers (IBP) to do what they do for less than $100. And that difference in cost then gets directly passed on to the consumer and makes it appear like, well, all you local people, you're a bunch of price gouging elitists, when actually the reason is because of these scaled prejudicial regulations that make us have to pay for the same licensing and the same compliance for a 50 beef per week outfit as a 5,000 beef per day outfit.
Wow, that's huge differential.
Sure it
Huge,
is.
huge
Sure it is.
differential.
Yeah, and yeah, the opposition, they say, well, we need a level playing field. We can't let you get by with things that they can't. Well, here's what they would say: level playing field. Here's the way they look at it. Okay, so let's take football. Um, you know, we want to be able to have football, but here's what we're going to do so that there's a level playing field. Nobody can play football unless they play on an official NFL stadium anymore. Those Sunday afternoon pickup games where the goal line's going to be the lilac bush and the garbage can over on this end. Over on this end is going to be the pear tree and the edge of the clothesline on this end. No, 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 no. We can't. We got a level playing field. The only place you can play football is in an NFL stadium. That's a true level playing field, but it is incredibly anti-competitive and um, uh, anti-freedom oriented for people to just opt out of to do something on their own, and so we desperately need freedom to be able to do something on their own. So if you want to come to my place and you think that my uh, uh, backyard slaughtered pork sausage is the best in the world and that's what you want, I should be able to sell it to you without a government agent involved with that transaction.
Have you ever been worried that the government would come after you and strip you of your licensing or
Oh,
your
well,
ability to farm?
yeah, well, if you like Folks This Ain't Normal, you'll really like Everything I Want to Do Is Illegal. That's another one of my books.
I haven't
Everything,
gotten to that yet.
yeah,
Scared to read that one.
yeah, Everything I Want to Do Is Illegal. And what's the subtitle of that one? War Stories from the Local Food Front, I think, is the subtitle. But yeah, the government's tried to close us down many, many times. If I adhered to the government requirements, we wouldn't exist. Our farm wouldn't exist. So the government doesn't like what we do, and it doesn't like choice, and it certainly doesn't like anything that's outside the jurisdiction of the food police.
Why wouldn't the Congress be interested in this, in what you've been doing all these years? We're really running into a problem between the genetically modified seeds and crops and the buying off of farming land in the United States. It's getting to a point of seriousness about
Yeah,
we need more farmers like you
yeah, yeah. Well, we
and more
sure,
farms like
yeah,
what you've built.
yeah. Well, we sure do. And so when you come down to what's the
I'm
weak
coming
link?
there, by the way. I will
What
go. I
what?
will visit.
Oh, yeah, good, good. What you ask? Well, what's the single thing? I mean, people ask me, I do a lot of, media stuff, and if you were king for a day, what would you do? And I just say, look, I come back to this Food Emancipation Proclamation. We've got to let farmers access the retail dollar. And because consumers want many, many more consumers today want better food, local food, affordable local food, or let's say direct farm food. They want it, but the farmers are inhibited from getting it to them because of these food regulations. And right now, Kim, I can't imagine. I just these are the things that I just dream about. I can't imagine a more, I don't want to get partisan with you, but um, I can't imagine a more Trumpian idea than a food emancipation proclamation. Can you imagine him standing up and saying, okay, today, everybody, we're going to food America's food system from the shackles and the enslavement of Tyson, and we're going to allow farmers and neighbor, we're going to now allow neighborhood food transactions to happen. No SWAT teams are going to come and visit your farm. Nobody's going to come and confiscate, put police tape on your
On your milk.
yeah, on your milk or your ice cream inventory. Now we're not going to let you sell to Walmart, but if an individual, if an end user wants to come on your farm, or you have a deal
And buy directly.
and buy directly, because they don't want to get the government food that's in Walmart and Costco. We're going to let that happen. Kim, that would unleash thousands and thousands of entrepreneurial farmer and culinary artists on the foodscape
I
that
love it.
would that would chip away, maybe even with pretty big chips, the oligarchical centralization of the current industrial food system. And I just can't imagine. I've told people over and over, I said, I really think if I had 30 minutes 30 minutes with Trump to pitch this idea, I think he'd be all over it. I mean, a food emancipation proclamation. I mean, you're going to be the next Lincoln, except you're going to do what Lincoln did for the slaves. We're going to do for the food system. I just think the similarity is so profound and whatever democratized for civil society. Personal freedom. Good. What good does personal freedom do if I don't have freedom to choose the fuel to feed my microbiome to give me the fuel to go express my freedom?
It's true. I mean, look at the number of Amish farms that have been attacked and raided.
Right,
That's
right.
unbelievable. It's
Yeah,
unbelievable. In order for a president, whether it would be Trump or anybody else that was in before, Democrat or Republican, the reality is that they have to buy in first to the need for the decentralization of farming and agriculture and to
yeah,
understand the whole system of what has happened. And to me, you've explained it in the first 135 pages of Folks, This Ain't Normal. It's there. It's right there. And so this is what everybody has to get. The thing is that I found with local farmers here, when I asked about certain vegetables, do they have chemicals on them? Somebody said, I don't know, well, they spray something on them or whatever. And it's like, what is something? And so you go to these farm, right? Like you go to a local area where they're selling stuff right from the farm. But if you don't have the answers, like local, I'm going local. But I'm
right,
not getting the answers I seek local to take
right,
full accountability for my body. When I go to Gore's, I still don't have an answer, and neither do they.
right,
I have to call, and I'm not, I mean, I eat their meat, don't get me wrong, but I don't know that answer.
right.
Is this, did they have the recent COVID injection? How many chickens are getting
But
injected with the COVID injection? I won't touch them,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
With a mass-produced spike protein. I mean, and the
yeah.
public doesn't know to inquire and ask because so many are brainwashed to think, oh, if they're injected, they're safer. I mean, it's an unbelievable thing. So even to go local it has its own
Yes.
process
Yeah.
and
Well,
patience. I may have to go 30 miles in
yeah.
to go to
Yeah.
a farm, or I may need to
Well,
come down to your farm
you,
two
you
hours
might
away
need,
from me.
yeah, you might need to get it from us. Yeah. That's,
Yes, sounds like I do.
yeah.
But it's really tragic that
Yeah.
even sometimes, and you see the farms around here,
Right.
but you don't know what they're spraying with
Right.
because it's about the consciousness that's running the farm.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's what needs to be transmitted to government. If you could get in to see
Yeah. Yeah.
Miss Rollins and Trump, they need to buy in on what's happened to the food supply. I mean, the fact that Bill Gates wants to help the administration with anything is laughable.
Yeah.
It's laughable.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No question about that. Um,
Ca-
that, 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 that
yeah, go
point's
ahead.
well taken. That point's well taken. Yeah. I think you're,
And I've done it. I just want you to know from personal experience, buy local and everything, or you go to a farmer's market. You still don't always get answers
yeah, that's right.
at a farmer's market.
Yeah.
Well, what happened to these? Did you put? I even heard that the what do you call it? Apple cider vinegar was purchased when Mrs. Braggs passed away, and I heard that Bill Gates may have bought into a part of it, and then who knows if the chemical appeal is being put on all those apples before they're turned into apple cider vinegar. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. 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 It's a big nut to crack. You're exactly
It's a big
right.
nut to crack. So everywhere you turn, you have to be all over it. Before we adjourn our first meeting, because I will read the other half of that book, I wanted you to talk a minute about your dad, and who was an innovator who used to design systems, and what he imparted to you about designing systems.
So Yeah, Dad was an accountant, definitely a genius. Um, and I
which
still
is rare for an accountant.
yeah, I still miss him
Put
terribly.
those together.
Yeah, yeah. But he I think he looked at this farming thing um partly as an ecologist, but way more like an economist. He saw the chemical approach. He saw the chemical approach as essentially um, a rat race that as a basically a drug addiction. You've got this drug addiction. You need a bigger hit. It gets more and more expensive, and it's debilitating over time. That's the way and so he saw that not just ecologically, but as an economic problem. And so I still remember, like yesterday, one Sunday afternoon, I don't know what, maybe 7 or 8, and he comes, he says, "Let's take this drive. I've heard about this farmer. I want to go see him." So I have no idea where he was, who he was. I don't even know what we saw there. The only thing I remember about that trip was coming home and Dad literally levitating off the car seat with the idea of mobile farm infrastructure, mobile shelter, mobile water, mobile fencing, and so from that day on, Dad's whole thrust was mobility. How do we design mobile systems so these animals can move around? They're not in some building. They can actually get fresh air, sunshine, green grass, exercise, and all that mobility. So even as early as, I mean, 1967, 8, 9, he built a portable loafing shelter for cows out of an old
Wow.
mobile home chassis, and we'd move it around, and that became an integral part of our entire fertility program for years, and still is. Where we basically like a portable shade tree, okay? So you could say, okay, cows, you're going to shade up and drop all your poop and pee right here today. Tomorrow we're going to and you could actually place this where you wanted the extra dung and impaction for land development, and it was absolutely critical. And so when people, think that we were very whatever creative, innovative, yeah, we were, but it wasn't like we sat around in a room and said, I wonder what we can be creative about. No, it was
Action.
yeah, it was actually just an outgrowth of design, of how do we design systems that mimic these natural patterns, and so everything grew out of that mindset.
Have you ever heard of bow biology? Building
Both,
biology?
yeah,
Building biology
yeah, building buildings that function
are
like biological
living,
yeah,
breathing
yeah,
beings,
yeah,
okay? But using materials that
yeah,
breathe
yeah,
and non-toxic materials. So you remind me. I interviewed George Swanson of Swanson and Associates, who we did a piece called "Living, Breathing Buildings." It was one of the most interesting of the many interesting shows that I produced. It was one of the most interesting, important pieces of information and guidance and knowledge. And believe it or not, in the building industry is as centralized and
yeah,
as political and is controlled
yes,
at the highest levels in terms of the materials that are and are not allowed to be used, having nothing to do with health and well-being.
yeah, and even architectural integrity. I mean, again, why? Well, because we have building inspectors. And I look at our house. I'm sitting here. I mean, our house was built in 1790. It's an old American chestnut log cabin, and this house. Think about the houses that last for centuries. These are not structures that ever had a building inspector. They were built by
Right.
craftsmen whose reputation was based on the integrity of their structures. And today, we just throw together these buildings that are minimalistic to the to the inspection requirements of the building code. And so you don't get innovation. You don't get you don't get big changes because you have these building inspectors. Well, no, you can't make a straw bale house. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do the other.
And built-in
And
obsolescence,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
key, right? To the
absolutely.
centralization, you have to have
Yeah.
built-in obsolescence.
Yeah, yeah, these stamp out houses. I just met a guy in Florida that sold his. He's been in construction all of his life. He just sold his business, and for a big pile of money. And at the end, there, right before he sold it, I mean, his business, they finish. Get this, they finish 15 houses a day in Florida.
Oh my God.
Just his business. They finish 15 houses a day. Can you imagine?
And that's not a state you want to put flimsy houses together in
Yeah,
either.
yeah. Well, I asked him about it, and he said, "Oh, yeah, they just stamp them out. They just stamp them out. Yeah, they all got exactly the same blueprint, same plan, same everything. They can buy the materials in bulk, and they just crank them out like
Wow.
like stamps."
It's unbelievable. It's
Yeah,
unbelievable. Large
yeah.
scale composting, and then we're wrapping this up. How do we initiate large scale composting, and how do we initiate it where we all live so that there's not flies all over your house when you're composting? What is the key to getting into composting? Honestly,
Well, let me.
most of us are
Right.
divorced from what this is and
Yeah,
how it works.
let me check your is your question lots of composting, or is it composting? Is it great big compost piles, or is it, when you say large scale composting, do you mean great big piles or lots of little piles?
I actually asked you two questions in one. That wasn't fair.
Well, that's what I'm
You
trying
had
to.
put in on the last page I got to before this interview. You
Uh-huh.
had talked about the importance of large scale composting.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
if this were done, it would change all of
Oh,
agriculture.
yes, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, gotcha.
And
So
biomass recycling, which I don't even know what that is.
yeah. So again, we're back to this foundational concept that soil is built through vegetative decomposition, biomass decomposition, wood, grass, brush, leaves, whatever. And so that's the way soil is built. That's what nature does to feed soil and feed the biology in the soil, the earthworms, the actinomycetes, and all that. And so the thing that we've done here on our farm to make large scale composting, and we do thousands of tons of composting here to make it possible, is we use pigs. And pigs do the turning. We call them pigorators. And we inject corn into the pile, and the pigs then seek the corn and they aerate it, and it composts beautifully. And so where do we get all the carbon for this? The carbon, the biomass. So we use the woods. We go in and we cut, we cut dead trees, junk trees, down trees. We chip them. So our fertilizer, here's the thing, our fertilizer budget is not going to Morocco for phosphate and to Vladimir Putin for urea. It's in situ, and that is again a very nature's balance sheet for fertility is in situ fertility. I don't think God designed our soils to be dependent on inputs from 5,000 miles away.
Clearly.
Yeah, it's in situ. And so the wood chipper becomes our tool to be able to get this scrap biomass into small pieces so that we can then use it as composting. The pigs then become the turner, so we're not using equipment and petroleum to do that. And the truth is that if we actually did this nationwide, we would eliminate the $8 billion a year we spend fighting fires, and all of that dead junk biomass could be converted into compost. We would eliminate the chemical fertilizer bill in the country. We would eliminate the forest fire bill in the country, and we would actually use our solar generated biomass vegetation to feed the soil, and that would then in turn germinate thousands and thousands of little 3 to 5 person biomass regeneration crews that would go out and harvest, dead trees and junk trees and overcrowded trees. I mean, go to Yosemite. Yosemite is like the worst ecological thing you can imagine.
How sad. I'm from California. I used to live in Los Angeles my whole life until I lived in Europe, and I feel so bad about what's happened to it didn't need to happen there.
No, it definitely didn't. But the greenies and the earth muffins and the
and
tree.
I used to be one. I used to be one, even with my last name being Greenhouse. Don't hold it against me. But I was a greenie.
Yeah.
Right. I thought we were killing the planet till I did over almost 40 shows on the environment and got my whooping in 2009 and spent several years on it and realized the lies that were told to us.
Yeah,
very painful.
Wow,
very painful.
That's powerful. But when we shut down the human visceral participation in this ecology process, we deny the planet the mechanical and intuitive capacity of the human spirit and technology to be able to leverage these natural patterns into a modern at a modern scale. And so if we did that, we would spawn thousands and thousands of crews around stewarding our woodlands, eliminating fires, eliminating the fertilizer bill, and that would actually create an entire class of newly affirmed citizenry that is currently banished to blue collar status, the margins of society. I mean, think about in Spain, the guys who prune the cork trees for maximum acorn production to make those Iberico pigs. Those guys are more revered in the culture and paid more than heart surgeons. That's how much that culture reveres the guys who prune those trees for maximum acorn production. And I'm suggesting that if our culture honored and respected this class of people who is the carbonaceous recycling group, it would fundamentally change the psychological perceptions of our country. And these parents would come home and their kiddos ask, well, what'd you do? And dad gets to say, well, I took down a bunch of junk trees so they wouldn't burn up the neighbor's place, and we chipped them, and they're going into farm fields to feed earthworms to build soil so that our generation gives your generation more soil than we inherited. And that is a noble, sacred mission.
And I'm going to say it's rainmaking time.
Yeah.
What a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show and to be present with you at this time in history where it's so critical that we actually learn what you know, what you wrote about, and how you operate and steward your land and your farm. And thank you so much for being here. How do people reach you, Joel?
So I'm a social media non-presence, and so everything that I do is through the farm, Polyface Farm. And so our website is Polyface, Polyface Farm. I do a weekly podcast. I do unscheduled blog posts. I try to post 2 or 3 times a week. My blog post is Musings from the Lunatic Farmer. I've written 16 books. Number 17 is on its way. And but everything is through Polyface Farm. You can get swag, you can get food, you can see where I'm speaking. I speak all over the world, and you can keep up with my schedule. And if you want to come and hear me, I'd be glad to see you. And you can come visit the farm. We have numerous events here, lots of lots of gatherings and events at the farm tours and seminars and things like that. But it's all through Polyface Farms is our website, and
Fabulous.
there's a lot of good stuff there to keep up with.
Thank you so much. And for the rest of you, thank you for tuning into It's Rainmaking Time. I'm Kim Greenhouse. We'd like you to come to the site. It's rainmakingtime.com or CH and listen to the over 500 segments that have been done with best-selling authors, heads of industry, pioneers, visionaries, artists, creatives, and tune in. Thank you so much. Thank you, Joel. It's Rainmaking Time.
Thank you, Kim.